Okay, just what is going on in Monster Hunter Wilds? Guardians, Frenzy Virus, Tempered Monsters, Artian Weapons, the LANDSPINE, and Wyvern Milk? If you were told that Monster Hunter games are standalone and you don't need to play prior games to understand Wilds, well, guess what? That was a lie, and now you're in too deep to get out. So buckle up, Buttercup, you're in for a ride, as today we seek to answer what's forbidden about the Forbidden Lands and answer a question we've all been asking. So here's the deal. In general terms, Monster Hunter games are standalone. From a mechanical perspective, it's the gameplay that has been the primary draw of Monster Hunter, with each game delivering a relatively self-contained story that only nods in small references to other games in the series. They exist in the same universe, sure, but almost exclusively those narratives don't intersect with each other. You don't need to play the first Monster Hunter all the way back on PS2 to enjoy or understand Monster Hunter for you. It still bears true with Wilds, until it doesn't. And as the universe expands, Wilds' narrative has expanded with it, moving the needle toward a more cinematic and fleshed out story like never before. So take this now as your first and only spoiler warning. We will be discussing key beats from Monster Hunter Wilds' story and expanding on these topics with a greater history of Monster Hunter in mind, including what we should expect in future content announcements. So if you haven't finished the main story, as much as I would love your review, please consider subscribing and saving this video for later. Got it? Okay, good. Now that we're here, you may be confused by all the terminology thrown about in Wilds' story. Even if you're familiar with prior entries of the series, ideas of Guardians and Wyvern Milk are completely new to us, yet incorporated with other familiar terms to the series. What's really interesting is how Wilds has exposed us to previous themes in Monster Hunter games that we were already familiar with, but presented them in an entirely new way. During the course of the Monster Hunter series, we get to see a variety of locations and travel to new areas as part of the game's progression. For the most part, the series has been focused on the currently inhabited areas of the world, all relatively close to one another in geographical proximity. This is known as the Old World. By contrast, the Expedition Team, or Fifth Fleet of Monster Hunter World, traveled to an entirely new location, which they referred to as the New World. This created a thematic separation between the Monster Hunter games of that era, exploring an entirely uncharted land. While Rise did return to the Old World first, Wilds takes World's idea of uncharted territory a step further, where the guild is seen surveying the known reaches of inhabited land. This marks a return to the Old World on the same continent as Monster Hunter games prior to World, exploring new ideas and widening our understanding of the core Monster Hunter landscape. Along the eastern border of the Old World lies the Forbidden Lands. For reasons unexplained, this place is off limits, and long documented by the guild to be devoid of human life for over 1,000 years. For obvious reasons, Wilds' entire story centers around just how wrong the guild was, furthermore challenging conventional knowledge that claimed monsters like ARKVELD had gone long extinct. Thus, we set into motion the events that unfold in the game, searching for NATA'S village and the calamity that struck his people, the Keepers. The question here is why? Why was it forbidden? Who forbid it? And did the guild make a mistake, or is there something more going on here? While the exact details of Monster Hunter lore and history are often hazy at best, there are at least a few common themes and empirical truths throughout the franchise. First are the Wyverians, a humanoid species whose lifespans far outlast those of humans. Generally speaking, Wyverians are portrayed as beacons of great knowledge and understanding, and revered for their wisdom. Encountering a Wyverian often comes hand in hand with enigmatic tales of a bygone age, or a stray line meant to suggest something greater. Overall, they'll rarely tell you anything outright and prefer to act as soul guides for the player to piece together the meaning for themselves. This is much like how Dark Souls would reveal bits and pieces of the game through its item flavor text. Although Wyverian hunters do exist, possessing great scientific knowledge to wield in battle, their tendency as a people toward harmony and knowledge makes these Wyverian hunters few and far between. They are the Monster Hunter embodiment of speak softly and carry a big stick. Second is ancient civilization. This has been the passion and the bane of many theory crafters in the Monster Hunter community, as we've tried to string together the disorganized fragments we've been fed from game to game, complemented by external works. Probably the most obvious reference to this is in the Artian technology. The equipment fashioned from this technology sticks out like a sore thumb from the very low fantasy aesthetic that the Monster Hunter games present themselves with. The identity of its creators have been long forgotten, but enigmatically, the technology to refurbish or reverse engineer them has not, acting as a herald of advanced technologies from ancient times. The other piece of well-documented history is the Kingdom of Schrade, but by well-documented, I mean that all we know is it existed and was brought to its knees by a great calamity. We know throughout Monster Hunter that this calamity was none other than Fatalis, the Black Dragon, but what remains of the people of Schrade, their way of life, or the kingdom itself is shrouded in mystery. All that stands as a testament to their kingdom is the remains of their great castle, where the Hunters Guild has stood to repel Fatalis upon its return. Now, before I continue, I want to be clear on how I will use the word backstory throughout the rest of this video. When I speak in reference to Monster Hunter backstory, I'm including all official supplemental works and design ideas in the development of the game throughout its lifespan, and not just the canonical story as it is represented through in-game narrative. Use of backstory in this way will include design ideas that were ultimately scrapped, but still a part of the history of the Monster Hunter team's development process when proposing ideas for these games. One frequently cited aspect from the Monster Hunter backstory is a concept from the Monster Hunter Encyclopedia, the equal dragon weapon. A man-made, half-artificial, all-monster meant to fight alongside the dragon hunters during the Great Dragon War. This beast was born of human atrocities against dragons, its biological makeup comprised of parts of over 30 living dragons. Some ideas suggest that this was the catalyst that ignited Fatalis' rage and ultimately set into motion the demise of the Kingdom of Schrade itself. Though the Equal Dragon weapon was published in an official work, the concept has been left abandoned ever since, and Monster Hunter fans still fervently debate its canonicity to this day. But what if I told you I am now convinced that the Equal Dragon weapon existed? And not in the way you might think. Fabius introduces the setting of the game, addressing the main character as a chosen hunter whose reputation precedes them. He speaks of the Forbidden Lands as a region restricted for 1,000 years, presumed uninhabited. The only remnants of the ancient civilizations that once inhabited the lands reside in historical records, one that speaks of the White Wraith as a monster long extinct. Upon the book he references is emblazoned the emblem of the Hunters Guild. This guild acts as the closest thing to a government in the Monster Hunter universe, establishing a code of conduct for hunters to abide by and enforcing laws around the study and preservation of wildlife and their ecosystems. For all intents and purposes, they're the association responsible for quests authorized for a hunter to embark on, research, technology, and cataloging the world's history and knowledge. The headquarters of the Hunters Guild is located in the city of Dendorma, a bastion of defense located in the Schrade region where a great elder referred to as His Immenseness acts as the guild's figurehead and managing director. In fact, this is the place mentioned by Olivia in Wilds when the player listens in on a conversation between her and Athos about where they'd like to visit. Unsurprisingly, His Immenseness is himself a Wyverian, outliving the lifespan of most human hunters. This is best evidenced in how we as hunters are able to visit Dendorma in both Monster Hunter DOS as well as Monster Hunter 4U. Between both games, he still sat there upon his throne as the head of the guild. Most notably, Dendorma is defended by BALLISTAE, cannons, and a Dragonator. Any hunter who's participated in the hunts to repel Fatalis are familiar with these sorts of siege artillery. These are weapons and technology dating back to the Kingdom of Schrade, perhaps even earlier than that. In World, our return to Castle Schrade shows a jerry-rigged barricade that blocks the hunters from use of the castle's Dragonator. It's not clear just how far back Castle Schrade's demise was in the overall history, but what we can glean from this is that technologies like the Dragonator present in Schrade are still in use today. This suggests Schrade's downfall may be more recent than we originally assumed. Even with all of the might of the Dragonator at their ready, the castle guard perished long before they could even use it. This is where we turn to the blurb that accompanies the Equal Dragon weapon in the encyclopedia. There's a subsegment here that speaks to the Great Dragon Hunters who are ancestors of modern-day monster hunters. Specifically, it mentions humans were the Great Dragon Hunters who participated in the age of the Great Dragon War. Mankind and dragons were embroiled in a conflict so fierce that it nearly brought both sides to extinction. It's in my mind that even with abandoned concepts like this, we may have an understanding of why a governing body like the Guild exists in the first place. If Wyverians have been the keepers of knowledge, with the Guild operated by one no less, it stands to reason that Wyverians may have had a far more direct involvement in this war of humans and dragons. Unlike the barbaric nature of humanity as presented by this excerpt, the present-day Guild carries a much more harmonious tone, where Wyverian values underpin the day-to-day operations and codes of conduct hunters abide by. Whatever their role may have been, one thing is clear. The ideas of ancient technologies from a more advanced civilization are repeating themes throughout the Monster Hunter franchise. While we don't know if they were the original creators of ancient technologies like Artian equipment, or even the denizens of Castle Schrade itself, Wyverian influence reaches deep into all aspects of the monster hunters we know today, establishing a guild that I believe intended to prevent another war of this scale. So where does this bring us to in Wilds? The journey in pursuit of the White Wraith has us trekking across multiple biomes, through different towns, and confronting the apex of each region. Only one common thread ties these areas together, where a large structure called the LANDSPINE emits a strange energy that impacts the peculiar weather patterns of the Forbidden Lands. Apart from the premise from Fabius at the very beginning, references to ancients and history were almost entirely forgotten and overlooked for the rest of the narrative. In reality, we don't revisit these themes until NATA'S fated reunion with his village and tribespeople. Enter Sild, a small subterranean outpost of ancient ruins. Here, we finally learn more about these keepers and what they were meant to do. As a tribe, their sole honor-bound duty is to uphold their village's age-old tradition, tending to the dark truth hidden beneath the world's surface, the key to which lies in the very pendant NATA'S father bestowed upon him years prior. You see, for them to live up to their namesake, keepers needed something to keep, and it was time for NATA to understand the truth. The journey brings the hunter deep into a storage facility amidst ancient ruins and half-destroyed technology. What they uncover there is where things start to get interesting. The Guardians. This is the real first clue to understanding both Wild's story as well as the Monster Hunter backstory. New variants for monsters aren't entirely unorthodox for Monster Hunter. We might think of Azure Rathalos or Pink Rathian as examples here. What's most noteworthy is when we examine the monster card in the large monster field guide. None of these guardians are classified as the usual wyvern, beast, leviathan, or other typical categories of monster. Instead, they're labeled as constructs. These monsters are a human byproduct. Even extinct species like ARKVELD are lab-grown, incubated, and hatched in this facility for reasons unknown. We come to find that these monsters sustain themselves on a byproduct of the LANDSPINE called WYLK. Alma remarks how the digestive system of these constructs has atrophied, and furthermore they lack organs to engage in sexual reproduction. For all intents and purposes, they are entirely self-sustaining, provided they have access to WYLK. Yet no sooner than we learn that these guardians have no need to eat, ARKVELD is found predating on other monsters, consuming them as any natural monster would. Side note, WYLK is evidently a portmanteau of mashing two words wyvern and milk together, which, to be honest, sounds only mildly more appetizing than silk. Guardian tested, ARKVELD disapproved. This begs more questions than answers. Who were these ancient people? Why would they want to manufacture monsters in the first place? What caused ARKVELD to attack NATA'S village? And furthermore, what does this have to do with Monster Hunter's backstory? We embark on our journey to Suja, the Peaks of Accord, where we meet the village elder, one that the keepers refer to as the Allharken. To little surprise, she herself is Wyverian, but even these questions sit far outside her knowledge, from a time long before what she calls the Reckoning. For the first time in a Monster Hunter game, we're presented with a dark tale of her people, denizens of the once prosperous capital of Wyveria. She speaks of the Dragontorch, a source of near-limitless energy, and stretching from it is the LANDSPINE, reaching across the land via long tunnels called wormways. Equipped with unfathomable power and backed by the pinnacle of science, to the people of Wyveria, nature's laws were no more than a mere suggestion. A plaything to be used and manipulated at will. In their hubris, such an incredible feat was not enough. They wanted more. Their crowning achievement, the pinnacle of their might, were the Guardians. Much like the Keepers, Guardians bear their name as an intended function or purpose. These were servile creatures, bred and raised to do the Wyverians' bidding, earmarking history with an age of Wyverian technology and military supremacy. They did not eat, for there was WYLK. They did not reproduce, for they were grown. They did not age, for they were genetically engineered not to. They were the beasts of burden and war to serve the great people of Wyveria. With such wide-reaching ambition, the Wyverians would need a means to sustain their army. The LANDSPINE, a structure not unlike the shape of a strand of DNA, would not only act as the conduit for Wyverian power to bend nature to their very will, it would also serve as the fuel source for their genetically engineered monsters. What do we see encasing all areas around Wormways? Crystalline WYLK, produced by the LANDSPINE. From the very beginning, Fabius mentions the strange substance that makes up NATA'S pendant. Its relevance only revealed as we further understand the nature of wyvern milk itself. If WYLK is made, this pendant is what would unmake it. It is the antithesis of WYLK, a substance so powerful it would release the molecular bonds of the entire LANDSPINE and undo all that the ancient Wyverians had built. This pendant would serve as the kill switch, the last resort of a desperate people should a great calamity befall their society. And if you've been paying attention, Keepers keep, Guardians guard. Each had their own purpose, and on the other hand, ARKVELD had nothing. With Wyveria long gone, it was a construct with no function to fill and no life of its own. Without purpose, it struggled and raged against the truth of its own existence. It was a being without meaning, of a species that had perished long ago. ARKVELD was truly alone, and so it fought to make a purpose for itself. It ate, it warred, it sought power. Power it would steal from other monsters, power that could ensure its life and preservation, power to give it freedom. And at the center of it all, the Dragontorch, a well of limitless energy. Should this power fall into the wrong hands, the fate of the world would fall on NATA'S shoulders as a keeper entrusted with the pendant that would forever unravel the very fabric that societies of the Forbidden Lands were formed on. When asked what happened to the people of Wyveria, the All-Harken only answered with, they invited calamity upon themselves. A rogue monster, desperate and unhinged, and backed by unfathomable power, would spell disaster not just for the Forbidden Lands, but for the entirety of the old world, perhaps more. ARKVELD could not be allowed to live. But it wasn't so simple. The truth of the Wyverians' reckoning would not be far off. Watching, waiting, threatening to surface once more. From within the great Dragontorch itself, another guardian, lying dormant in an ancient storage facility. Wyveria's secret weapon, Zoh Shia, poised to wake from its slumber and bring all the power of the Dragontorch to bear as the pinnacle of Wyverian bioengineering. Zoh Shia must die, forcing NATA to undo all that the Keepers kept, destroying the power that the good people of the Forbidden Lands relied upon. To save the world from calamity, this power would have to be destroyed, and the responsibility for this world's fate would be placed squarely on a young boy's shoulders. He himself would be without purpose, just like ARKVELD, with only himself to blame. And when we turn back to the encyclopedia, what do we see? An artificial dragon discovered in the ruins of some ancient storage facility where the technology to craft an equal dragon weapon reached its pinnacle during the Great Dragon Wars, which nearly brought the ancient civilization to extinction. For what was an abandoned concept, there are some striking similarities between the equal dragon weapon's lore and Zoh Shia's origin, even down to its very movements, its attacks, even the motif uses a call to Fatalis in its battle theme. There's a lot of parallels between them here. A genetically engineered dragon found in the ruins of an ancient facility built by an ancient civilization that faced calamity and were nearly brought to extinction? I thought that perhaps the equal dragon weapon had finally come to life. We could put speculation to rest on the EDW and have a conclusive answer on what Capcom would do with this idea. And so here I am after multiple writes and rewrites of this script, and I can confidently answer the question many of us have been asking. Is Zoh Shia the equal dragon weapon? The answer might surprise you, or maybe you knew all along, but that answer is no. Zoh Shia is not the equal dragon weapon. Quite frankly, the reasons had my head spinning, and I believe they may actually confirm the equal dragon weapon's existence. Allow me to explain. As I was playing Wilds, I wondered why the truth behind the Forbidden Lands contradicted all known records. But then I realized the guild had motive. What would be more damning to the Wyverians than their own weapon being their downfall? The blight on their image as a peaceful people in history and the icon of their hubris. Zoh Shia as a symbol of cataclysmic horror that served as the harbinger to the Wyverian fall from grace would be a stain on ancient Wyverian society so potent that it would call their every motive into question. And at the head of the guild, his immenseness, a Wyverian whose people created a calamity, the likes of the Black Dragon himself. I don't believe the records of the ancient capital were merely lost to time. Tashin takes us through a library of knowledge full of books on Wyverian technology, all of which survived Wyveria's downfall. No, I believe the guild was fully aware of the dangers that lurked underneath the surface of these lands and forbid any and all travel to and from them. Furthermore, I believe that much of, if not all, known records of the events in ancient Wyveria were intentionally redacted by the guild for fear of discovering the humiliating truth of the Wyverian people. And what convinced me of this the most isn't even mere speculation. This isn't off-the-wall theorizing here, it's a matter of fact directly confirmed in-game. We know the large monster field guide shows the monster's classification, sure. There's a whole rash of other useful information here, even down to a monster's weakness. But when we continue further through the pages, we find titles to unlock based on the number of times we've hunted a given monster. What do we see for Zoh Shia's titles? Secret weapon. And more specifically, verboten, a word derived from German meaning forbidden. In English, however, the flavor of meaning doesn't stop there. We're not talking about just forbidden, but specifically forbidden by an authority. The Forbidden Lands were forbidden because the guild feared what we might find and call into question the very authority that established the Hunters Guild in the first place. At best, if Zoh Shia were awakened, the guild would be thrown into chaos. At worst, Wyveria's hubris would be the very downfall of mankind. This alone places Zoh Shia and even the capital of Wyveria far too modern to be the equal dragon weapon. In fact, it's more modern than Schrade itself. Both Artian equipment and Schrade stand as testimonies of ancient technology. Technologies preserved throughout the ages. These are empirical truths in Monster Hunter. Blacksmiths today still have the technology to craft Artian weapons and armor. The artillery of Schrade can be seen in the BALLISTAE and Dragonators still in use today. What ancient technology we have access to is preserved and maintained. But when we observe the equal dragon weapon, we find something puzzling right from the second sentence. Quote, "It is possibly the only remaining weapon of war from the age of the Great Dragon War." End quote. The time at which this observation was made indicates that Artian weapons and Dragonators exist at the time the description was written, where they would be in use by hunters in the present. If we have access to these technologies in present day, we then wouldn't refer to the EDW as the only remaining weapon of war, and instead would include the likes of the Dragonator in this description. This means that the fall of Schrade could not have been the near extinction mentioned, and clearly separates the calamity of Fatalis from the time of the Great Dragon War. Further yet, the equal dragon weapon was pieced together from other dragons. Guardians, on the other hand, are incubated and grown. The ultimate representation of this is Zoh Shia, encased in crystalline WYLK at the center of the Dragontorch. This is far from a beast that was built out of numerous parts of different other monsters, even when we consider its fallen form free of all of its crystal armor. But what sets Zoh Shia more modern than Schrade was quite interesting to me, and is best demonstrated when we study its movements. In fact, I'd go so far as to say it was inspired by Schrade. At least partly. Many hunters are right to remark many of the parallels between Zoh Shia and Fatalis, but for a monster to be genetically engineered to embody the traits of existing monsters, there must have been a genetic sample to draw from. In other words, the fall of Schrade would have already had to have occurred for Fatalis to be studied and a sample to be collected for Zoh Shia. But then, why wouldn't Zoh Shia just be a man-made clone of Fatalis? We see Guardian Odogaron, Guardian Rathalos, Guardian Anjanath, even Guardian ARKVELD, an extinct creature. These monsters have been enhanced, sure, but are otherwise still the same monster as their genetic legacies. Instead of Guardian Fatalis, we see Zoh Shia exhibiting traits of not just multiple forms of Fatalis, but also Elatrian, Shara Ishvalda, and Safi Jiva. For all intents and purposes, this construct is very much just that. A man-made construct, a fully lab-grown, man-made monster in a design of its own. This abomination was of strictly Wyverian making and aberrant to anything found in nature. Nevertheless, such a design had to come from somewhere. Earlier, I spoke on all of the different parallels and similarities between Zoh Shia and the Equal Dragon weapon. There are quite a few concepts that the two share, and certainly there's been a lot of discussion about the lore and backstory of the Equal Dragon weapon already. When we consider this, I believe that the Wyverians would have needed an example to study, one they could draw inspiration from. This to me suggests that Wyverians, mighty in the areas of science and knowledge, would have known of the Equal Dragon weapon. Perhaps they could have even been the people who excavated it, reverse engineered it, and built their own. Zoh Shia's existence certainly suggests that the Wyverians at least knew of the Equal Dragon weapon and sought to harness that kind of power for themselves through their crowning achievement, the Guardians. Why raise an army when you could grow it? The blueprint for a fabled weapon from an age of the Great Dragon War sat quite comfortably in the palm of your hands. This was the downfall of Wyveria. The unchecked hunger for power, the flagrant disregard for nature and her laws, the failure to learn from history, and the foolishness to think that they were impervious to the same tragedy, all backed by the power to create weapons of war without adequate balance to keep that power in check. A proud people, and that pride cost them everything. The Great Dragon War, the fall of Schrade, the reckoning of Wyveria, a guild meant to keep the darkest parts of known history under lock and key, and a land long forbidden to ensure it stays that way. With Title Update 1 bringing Zoh Shia back as a high-rank monster, we've only just been exposed to its ability to regenerate, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. If this is a genetically engineered creature taking from the legacies of other known monsters to the point that even extinct monsters could return, Capcom has now laid the foundation for massive implications in Wilds. Further title updates and the DLC expansion next year are likely where Capcom is going to flesh out this concept further, building off of those concepts. So I turn to you, Hunter. Does Zoh Shia prove the Equal Dragon weapon existed, or is this just Capcom's way of finally putting the concept to use after so long? You tell me. I'm Jade, and I've been making Monster Hunter videos since Wilds announced at TGA 2023. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, and while you're at it, drop me a subscription if you're interested in seeing more videos just like this one. On screen is a playlist of all my Monster Hunter videos to date, as well as a video handpicked just for you. As always, Hunters, may the Sapphire Star guide your way. I'll see you in the comments below.